I opened my eyes after 6 months, trapped in the silence of a coma. And the first words I heard, "Thank God you're okay." No, it was my own daughter standing at the foot of my hospital bed, arms crossed, telling me, "I already transferred the deed to Mom's new husband. We didn't think you were coming back, Daddy." The fluorescent lights above me felt like daggers stabbing into my skull. I blinked hard, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. My daughter, Keisha Robinson, stood there in a Navy business suit, looking more like a lawyer delivering bad news than my baby girl. Next to her was my ex-wife, Patricia, and some man I'd never seen before tall, smug, wearing a Rolex that caught the light like it was trying to show off. "What? What did you say?" My voice came out like gravel scraping concrete. 6 months of not speaking had turned my throat into sandpaper. "The house, Daddy," Keisha repeated, her tone cold and clinical. "Your house in Decatur. I signed the transfer papers 3 months ago. Gerald and Mom needed somewhere to live, and the doctor said you probably weren't going to wake up. We had to make a decision. Before I continue, let me ask you something. If you value these real-life stories, the kind that make you question family, loyalty, and what justice really means, help me hit 20,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what state you're watching from. And if this story hits home, leave me a like. Let's shoot for 400 likes on this one. Your support keeps these stories coming. Now, let's get back to it. I tried to sit up, but my body fought me. My muscles had wasted away during those 6 months, leaving me weak as a newborn. Keisha, that house is mine. I built that business from the ground up to afford it. When you were just a little girl, every brick of that house represented my sweat. Gerald, the stranger with the Rolex, stepped forward. His cologne was expensive, too expensive. "Look, Mr. Robinson, I understand this is difficult, but the paperwork is all legal. The transfer happened months ago. We've already moved in and made some renovations." Renovations? The word tasted like poison in my mouth. Patricia finally spoke, her voice lacking any trace of the warmth I remembered from our 20 years together. "James, the papers are signed and filed. The county clerk processed everything. It's done." I looked at my daughter, searching for some sign of the little girl who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read her bedtime stories. The child I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college at Spelman. The woman I'd walked down the aisle just 2 years ago. But that person wasn't standing in this hospital room. In her place was a stranger wearing her face. "How could you do this?" I whispered, feeling something crack inside my chest that had nothing to do with my medical condition. "Daddy, you need to understand," Keisha started. "Don't call me that." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "A daughter doesn't do this to her father." Patricia sighed, like I was an inconvenient problem she'd been forced to deal with. "James, be reasonable. You were hooked up to machines for half a year. The medical bills were astronomical. Someone had to make decisions. And you decided to steal my home?" I said, rage beginning to burn through the fog of confusion and medication. "It's not stealing when I'm your only heir," Keisha replied with a twisted logic that made my stomach turn. "I just accelerated the inevitable. Gerald and Mom were living in a cramped apartment. You weren't in any position to object. I'm right here." I shouted with whatever strength my damaged lungs could gather. "I'm alive." I woke up. The silence that followed was suffocating. A nurse poked her head through the door, concern written all over her face, but Gerald waved her away like she was a waitress he was dismissing. "Yes, you woke up," Patricia said with an unsettling calm. "And now we need to discuss what happens next. Gerald's business partner and his family are already settled in the house. They've made significant changes. It wouldn't be right to uproot them now." "It wouldn't be right?" I laughed, and it hurt my chest. What about what's right for me? Dad, you have to understand the position we were in, Keisha began, but I cut her off with a look that could have melted steel. Patricia pulled out her phone, scrolling through something like she was bored. Look, James, we've arranged for you to stay in a small rental unit in Lithonia. It's not much, but it's affordable. I want my house. That's not possible anymore, Gerald interjected, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Legally speaking, the property belongs to us now. Even if you wanted to challenge this in court, you don't have the resources. Your savings went toward the portions of medical bills that insurance didn't cover. I felt like I was drowning. Everything I'd worked for, everything I built during 47 years of life, had vanished while I was fighting to survive. You need to be discharged in 48 hours, Keisha continued, her voice all business. The insurance won't cover any more time here. We can pick you up and take you to the rental, or you can make your own arrangements. I stared at both of them, these people who were supposed to be my family. 6 months. That's all it took for them to erase me from my own life. Get out, I said quietly. Dad, get out. My shout echoed down the hospital corridor. I don't want to see either of you again. Keisha exchanged a glance with Patricia, who simply shrugged. Gerald checked his Rolex, like this whole scene was keeping him from something important. Suit yourself, my daughter said. But think about it, Daddy. Without our help, you have nowhere to go. I watched them leave, their footsteps fading down the hallway, taking with them the last remnants of what I thought was my family. What they didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that I wasn't the same man who'd fallen into that coma 6 months ago. Something had changed during that long darkness. Some kind of clarity had crystallized in the silence. And when I walked out of that hospital 2 days later, alone and asking for nothing, I set myself on a path they never saw coming. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. To understand how I ended up in that hospital bed, you need to know who I was before the coma. My name is James Earl Robinson. I'm 57 years old, though after 6 months lying motionless, my body felt more like 80. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, where I learned early that hard work was the only inheritance worth anything. When I was 28, I married Patricia Collins. She was a bank teller, and I was managing a small construction crew. We didn't have much except dreams and a willingness to hustle. Keisha came along 3 years later, and that baby girl became my entire world. I built our house in Decatur, Georgia, with my own hands, literally, every weekend for 4 years. After putting in 50-hour weeks running my own landscaping business, I spent my Saturdays and Sundays laying brick, installing plumbing, running electrical. Keisha was just a toddler then, but I remember her following me around the construction site, asking why we needed so many nails and what made the cement stick together. Someday this'll be yours. Baby girl, I'd tell her while she handed me tools with her tiny hands. But for now, it belongs to all three of us. Patricia and I split up when Keisha turned 19. It wasn't dramatic. We just grew apart. Different dreams, different paths. The divorce was amicable. She got the newer car. I kept the house and my business. Keisha stayed close to both of us. I poured everything into that girl. Worked doubles to pay for Spelman College. Sold my boat to cover her study abroad semester in Paris. Skipped meals so she could have money for internships that didn't pay. Every sacrifice felt small compared to watching her graduate summa cum laude. Keisha got herself a good corporate job at Coca-Cola headquarters. She married a man named Devin 2 years back, seemed like a decent guy, worked in tech, drove a Tesla. I spent nearly $15,000 on that wedding, money I'd saved for years. But she was my only child. I would have given her the world. Patricia remarried about a year ago to Gerald Hutchins. I'd never met him, but Keisha mentioned he was some kind of business consultant. Made good money, apparently. Drove luxury cars. Wore expensive suits. I was happy for Patricia. She deserved someone who could give her the lifestyle she wanted. About 8 months ago, I started feeling off. Dizziness, confusion, headaches that wouldn't quit. Took the doctors 3 weeks to figure it out, a brain aneurysm, sitting there like a ticking bomb. They rushed me into emergency surgery one Tuesday afternoon after it ruptured while I was mowing a client's lawn. The surgery went well, they told me later. But my brain needed time to recover. I slipped into a coma. The last thing I remember before the darkness was Keisha holding my hand in the ICU, tears streaming down her face, telling me, "Hold on, Daddy. Don't leave me. I need you." Those words stayed with me through the 6 months of silence. They were my anchor, my reason to fight my way back to consciousness. And when I finally opened my eyes, expecting to see relief and love on my daughter's face, I got the news that she'd given away my home to strangers. The house I'd built for her. The house where she grew up. The house where we'd celebrated every birthday, every graduation, every milestone. Gone. Handed over like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. While I lay in that hospital bed processing the magnitude of this betrayal, a nurse came in to check my vitals. She was older, maybe mid-60s, with kind eyes and gentle hands. She must have seen something in my expression, because she paused. "You all right, Mr. Robinson?" I thought about her question. No, I wasn't all right. I'd woken up from a coma to discover I'd lost everything. But there was something they didn't know. Something neither Keisha nor Patricia, nor that smug Gerald had considered. And that something was going to change everything. Left the hospital 2 days later on a Thursday. Morning with nothing but the clothes Keisha had. Dropped off in a plastic grocery bag and whatever dignity I had left. Nobody came to pick me up. The physical therapist gave me strict instructions. Walk slowly, rest often, take the medications on schedule. My body was still weak. My legs trembled after just 100 feet. But I had something that 6 months in a coma couldn't take from me. Determination. I took an Uber to the neighborhood where I'd lived for the past 23 years. I gave the driver my own address, because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed confirmation that what Keisha told me was real and not some medication-induced nightmare. When the car pulled up in front of the house, I felt my heart shatter all over again. There was a brand new Lexus SUV in the driveway, gleaming white with temporary tags still in the window. The garden I'd maintained so carefully was different. The azaleas I'd planted when Keisha was born were gone. In their place was some kind of modern rock garden with metal sculptures that looked like they cost more than my first car. The front porch, where I'd built a swing with my own hands, was now covered with expensive wicker furniture and potted plants I didn't recognize. The oak door I'd stained and refinished every 3 years was replaced with something that looked like it belonged in a magazine, all glass and brushed steel. "This the place?" the driver asked. I couldn't answer right away. I just nodded and paid him with the $40 a hospital social worker had given me from some kind of patient assistance fund. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at what used to be my home. A woman in her 50s came out to water the plants on the porch. Designer athleisure wear, expensive sunglasses, manicured nails. She didn't recognize me. To her, I was just some old man looking lost. "Can I help you?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. This was my house. I managed to say. The woman's expression shifted from suspicious to uncomfortable. "I think you might be confused, sir. This house belongs to us. We purchased it months ago." "Purchased it? From who? How much did you pay?" "That's really none of your business," she replied, her tone harder now. "If you don't leave, I'm going to call the police." A man emerged from the house behind her. Younger, maybe early 40s, athletic build. Expensive polo shirt with some golf club logo. "Everything okay, Sharon?" This man claims this used to be his house. The man studied me with a mixture of pity and discomfort. "You must be James Robinson," he finally said. "Gerald mentioned you. I'm Richard Hutchins, his business partner. Look, I'm sorry about your situation, but the paperwork is all legal. Everything's been filed with the county." "Legal doesn't mean just," I said, though my legs were starting to fail me. Sharon's voice softened slightly. "Look, Mr. Robinson, I don't know what happened between you and your family, but we lost our previous home in a bad investment. We were desperate for a fresh start. Gerald offered us this opportunity, and we took it. We paid for it. It wasn't a gift. How much?" I insisted. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. "That's between us and Gerald," Richard said. "I didn't need them to tell me. I could see it in their faces. They'd paid a fraction of what the house was worth. Keisha had done a favor for Gerald's business partner, and they'd been desperate enough, or convenient enough, to accept." "The azaleas," I said suddenly. "The azaleas that were in the front yard. I planted those when my daughter was born." "What did you do with them?" Sharon went pale. We didn't know. Gerald said we could renovate however we wanted. We replaced them with the rock garden because maintenance is easier." I didn't hear the rest. I turned and started walking, ignoring the pain shooting through my weakened legs, ignoring Richard calling after me offering to call a cab, ignoring everything except the need to get away before I collapsed in front of strangers in what used to be my garden. I walked for what felt like hours. My body was screaming at me to stop, but my mind was somewhere else, calculating, remembering, planning. I ended up at Rosa's Diner, a place where Patricia and I used to have breakfast every Sunday morning back when we were still married. Rosa Martinez. The owner nearly dropped the coffee pot when she saw me walk in. "James. Oh my God, James." She rushed over, wrapping her arms around me in a hug that made my ribs ache. "We thought. Keisha said you probably weren't going to wake up." "I woke up," I said simply, dropping into a booth before my legs gave out. Rosa brought me coffee and a plate of eggs and bacon without me asking. She slid into the seat across from me, her eyes full of tears and questions. "Where have you been? Why didn't you call? We tried to visit you at the hospital, but Keisha said you were too fragile for visitors. You tried?" A small flame of hope flickered in my chest. "Who else?" "Everyone, James. The whole neighborhood. We organized a fundraiser to help with your medical bills. Raised almost $4,000 and gave it to Keisha to make sure it got to the hospital." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. $4,000? I know it's not much, but, Rosa, did that money ever reach the hospital? She blinked, confused. Keisha said it did. She said you were incredibly grateful, that it helped cover some of the costs insurance wouldn't. I closed my eyes. Another lie. Another betrayal. I told Rosa everything. Every word Keisha and Patricia and Gerald had said to me in that hospital room. The house, the in-laws' business partner, the order to accept the rental unit in Lithonia or make my own arrangements. Rosa listened with growing horror etched across her face. That's evil," she whispered when I finished. "Your own daughter? How could she do this to you?" "I don't know," I admitted. "The Keisha I raised, the girl I put through college, she never would have done this. But that Keisha doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe she never really did. You have to fight this. This can't be legal signing papers while you are unconscious. Keisha is legally my heir. Technically, she had the right to make decisions about my property if doctors certified I was incapacitated. And they did. I spoke with the hospital's social worker. Everything is technically legal. But morally, Rosa slammed her fist on the table in frustration. Morality doesn't win court battles, Rosa. And I don't have money for lawyers. Keisha made sure of that. She stared at me for a long moment, then stood up with determination in her eyes. Stay right here. She disappeared into the back of the diner and returned 5 minutes later with a key. I have a storage room upstairs. Used to keep extra supplies up there, but I cleared it out last year. There's a futon, a small bathroom. It's not much, but, Rosa, I can't. Yes, you can, and you will. Her tone left no room for argument. Your family, James. More family than that ungrateful daughter of yours. You're staying here until we figure this out. That night, lying on a futon in a storage room that smelled like coffee beans and cleaning supplies, I stared at the water-stained ceiling and finally let the tears come. I'd lost my house, my savings, my daughter. But as I lay there in the darkness, I remembered something my grandmother told me when I was just a boy struggling with bullies at school. Baby, what defines us isn't what people take from us. It's who we choose to be when they try to break us down. And I was about to decide exactly who I was going to be, because Keisha had made one critical mistake. She forgot that the man who built that house with his own hands also knew exactly how to dismantle lies brick by brick. The next few days were about survival and strategy. Rosa gave me work at the diner, simple tasks my weakened body could handle. Bussing tables, washing dishes, sweeping floors. She paid me way more than the work was worth, and we both knew it. But my pride was already so damaged that I accepted without complaint. I needed to eat. I needed my medications. And I needed time to think. Time to remember. Time to plan. A week after leaving the hospital, Keisha showed up at the diner. I saw her through the kitchen window, pulling up in a brand new Mercedes, not the Honda she'd been driving before my coma. She walked in looking around like she was inspecting a health code violation. Rosa told me you were here, she said when she found me wiping down tables. We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about, I replied without looking at her, continuing my work. Daddy, please. I know you're upset. Upset? I set the rag down harder than intended. You think I'm upset? Keisha, you stole my life. My house, my savings, my dignity. I didn't steal anything. Legally, forget legality. My voice echoed through the empty diner. Rosa appeared from the kitchen, concerned, but I waved her back. I was in a coma, not dead. I was going to wake up. The doctors never said it was impossible. Keisha ran her hands through her straightened hair, a gesture she'd made since childhood when she was nervous. For a second, I saw the little girl I'd raised. But only for a second. The expenses were crushing us, Daddy. The hospital bills, the treatments, the ongoing care. Devin lost his job 3 months into your coma. Gerald's business was struggling. Mom was drowning in debt. I had to make hard choices. You had to what? Sell out your father for convenience? I didn't sell you out. I made difficult decisions under impossible circumstances. And the $4,000? I asked suddenly. The money the neighborhood raised for my medical expenses. Where is that? Keisha's face went pale. That went toward related costs. Toward your new Mercedes? Toward the renovations on my house that Gerald's business partner is living in now? We needed reliable transportation to visit you at the hospital. But you didn't visit me, did you? You told everyone I was too fragile for visitors. You isolated me so nobody would question what you were doing. The silence between us stretched like a chasm. I came here to offer you something, Keisha finally said, pulling an envelope from her designer purse. $750 a month. It's what we can afford to give you. So you can rent something decent. It's settled. We can afford? I laughed without humor. How generous. And what about the rest of my money? My savings account had $62,000 in it. Where did that go? My daughter couldn't meet my eyes. Medical bills. I told you. Lie. The word dropped between us like a stone. I spoke with the hospital billing department. Insurance covered 85%. My out-of-pocket expenses were less than $12,000. Keisha, where is the other $50,000? There were other expenses. Legal fees, administrative costs, lawyers to steal my house while I was unconscious. You mean? It wasn't stealing. I had legal power of attorney. The entire process was. Do you know what the worst part is, Keisha? I interrupted, my voice dropping to a painful whisper. It's not the money. It's not even the house. It's that you had 6 months. 6 months where you could have waited, could have had faith. But you gave me 3. 3 months before you erased me from my own life. The doctor said your chances were minimal. I don't care what the doctor said. I slammed my hand on the table. I was your father. You were supposed to wait. You were supposed to believe. Keisha stepped back like I'd physically struck her. For a moment, I saw tears forming in her eyes, and part of me, that stupid, eternal father part, wanted to comfort her. But then she spoke. If you had just died, this would have been so much simpler. The air left the room. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to stop. What did you say? Keisha realized what she'd said, horror flooding her face. No, I didn't mean it like that. Daddy, get out. My voice was pure ice. Daddy, please, get out. I shouted. Get out before I do something we'll both regret. Keisha practically ran to her Mercedes, leaving the envelope with the money on the table. I watched through the window as she sat in the driver's seat, her hands covering her face, clearly crying. But she didn't come back. She just started the engine and drove away. Rosa emerged from the kitchen, her eyes red. I heard everything, she admitted. James, I'm so sorry. I picked up the envelope and opened it. $750. Less than what I used to spend monthly on the house maintenance. A handout from my own daughter. That night, alone in my storage room, I pulled out the box of personal belongings I'd retrieved from the hospital. Among them was my old wallet, and inside, wrinkled and faded, was a business card I'd kept for years. Marcus Sterling, attorney at law, family law and estate planning. Marcus had gone to high school with me in Birmingham. We'd stayed in touch over the years. He'd offered his help at Patricia's and my divorce, handled it for almost nothing. Told me if I ever needed legal counsel again, just call. I'd never called. Never needed to. Until now, I dialed the number from Rosa's cordless phone. He answered on the 4th ring. Marcus Sterling. Marcus, this is James Robinson. I don't know if you remember me, but Jimmy? Of course I remember you. Man, I heard about the coma. Are you all right? When did you wake up? I told him everything. Every single detail. Every betrayal. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Jimmy, Marcus finally said, his voice deadly serious, what you're describing is potentially fraud, abuse of power of attorney, and embezzlement. If I can prove even half of what you're telling me, Keisha could face criminal charges. I don't want revenge, I said, surprised by how true it felt. I just want justice. I want back what's mine. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring whatever documents you have. And Jimmy, this is going to be long and ugly. You sure you want to do this? She's your daughter. I thought about Keisha's words. If you had just died, this would have been so much simpler. She was my daughter, I corrected. The woman who showed up here today is a stranger wearing her face. Yes, Marcus. I'm sure. After hanging up, I sat there staring at the business card in my shaking hands. The next morning, while I was getting ready to meet Marcus, I received a call from an unknown number. Mr. Robinson? This is Diane Foster. I'm a notary public in DeKalb County. I need to speak with you urgently about some documents your daughter presented 5 months ago. My heart started racing. What kind of documents? I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Can you come to my office this afternoon? It's important. Very important. There was something in her voice, urgency mixed with guilt, that made my pulse quicken. I'll be there, I promised. Diane Foster's office was in downtown Decatur, in an old building that smelled like old paper and lemon furniture polish. I was shown in immediately, which seemed unusual. The notary was a black woman in her late 40s, her hair in neat locks, reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. But what struck me most was her expression, a mixture of relief and shame when she saw me walk in. Mr. Robinson. She stood to shake my hand. Thank you for coming so quickly. Please, sit down. Can I get you some water? I just want to know why you called me. Diane nodded, adjusting her glasses nervously. She sat down and opened a thick file folder. 5 months ago, your daughter Keisha came to my office with medical documentation. 2 certificates signed by physicians at Grady Memorial Hospital. The certificates stated that you were in a persistent vegetative state with virtually no possibility of recovery. I felt rage building in my chest. I was never in a persistent vegetative state. I was in a medically induced coma with an uncertain prognosis. I know that now, she said quietly. I know that now. But at the time, with those certificates in my hands, signed by licensed physicians, I had no reason to doubt their authenticity. And what did Keisha want? She filed for complete power of attorney over your assets, citing permanent incapacitation. And the first granted it. The room started spinning. You gave her complete control. Yes, but there's more, Mr. Robinson, much more. And that's why I called you. Diane pulled another document from the folder, her hands trembling slightly. 4 days after obtaining the power of attorney, Keisha returned with her mother and Gerald Hutchins. They presented property transfer documents for your house. The declared sale price was $95,000. $95,000? I shot up from my chair. That house is worth at least $350,000. Exactly, Diane said, her voice now firm. And that seemed wrong to me. Very wrong. But Keisha argued that she needed quick cash for your ongoing medical care. That Gerald's business partner was the only buyer willing to purchase immediately. That it was a family arrangement with special circumstances. And you believed her? Diane removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. Mr. Robinson, I process dozens of transactions every month. Some raise red flags, yes. But if all the paperwork is in order, I can't refuse to notarize without concrete evidence of fraud. And Keisha presented everything the power of attorney. The medical certificates, even a letter supposedly written by you before the coma, expressing your wishes for Keisha to handle your affairs if something happened to you. I never wrote any such letter. I realized that when I saw the news. She turned her computer monitor toward me. On the screen was an article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution from 10 days ago. Decatur man awakens after 6-month coma, family overjoyed. There was my photo, taken by some journalist who'd snuck into my hospital room. When I saw this article, Diane explained, when I read that you'd woken up and that your prognosis was never a persistent vegetative state, I knew something was terribly wrong. I started investigating. I contacted Grady Memorial Hospital. My hands gripped the armrests of my chair. And? The medical certificates Keisha presented were forged. The doctors whose names appear on them do exist and did work at Grady, but they never signed those documents. The hospital has no record of ever issuing them. The signatures were fabricated. The room tilted. Keisha forged medical documents. So it appears. And there's more. Diane pulled out another sheet. When Gerald's business partner purchased your house for $95,000, that money never reached any account connected to you, not even the accounts Keisha controlled under the power of attorney. The money simply vanished. Or more accurately, it never existed. It was a fraudulent sale designed to transfer the property without it appearing as a gift. Why are you telling me all this? I asked, trying to process the enormity of what I was hearing. You notarized those documents. You're implicated in this. Diane looked me straight in the eyes. Because I was deceived, Mr. Robinson. Because I've been a notary for 22 years, and I have never not once knowingly participated in fraud. And because when I saw your photograph in that newspaper, when I read that you are alive and conscious, I couldn't sleep. Haven't slept right since. She walked to the window, her back to me. My uncle had a stroke 12 years ago. The doctor said he'd never wake up. My whole family gave up hope. Except my aunt. She believed. And he woke up 6 months later. Lived another 8 good years. Her voice cracked. When I saw your case, Mr. Robinson, when I saw that your daughter had given up on you so quickly, so completely, I couldn't stay silent. What exactly are you offering? Diane turned back to me, and in her eyes I saw determination. I have copies of every document Keisha presented. The forged medical certificates. The record showing the money from the sale was never properly transferred. Everything. And I'm willing to testify. Mr. Robinson, I'm willing to admit my error in not investigating more thoroughly. And I'm willing to help you reverse this fraud. Why? This could destroy your career. Because it's the right thing to do, she said simply. And because I won't be complicit in a daughter's betrayal of her father. My conscience means more than my career. She handed me a thick envelope. This is everything. Copies of all the documents. Take them to your attorney. There's enough here to void every transaction, recover your house, and potentially prosecute Keisha and Gerald for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. I took the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy, substantial, real. Does Gerald's business partner know? I asked. Diane shook her head. I don't believe so. I spoke with Richard Hutchins last week, ran into him at the grocery store. He and his wife genuinely seemed to believe they purchased the house legitimately. They're victims in this too, Mr. Robinson. Keisha used them just like she used you. I left that office in a daze, walking the streets of Decatur for hours, the envelope pressed against my chest like treasure. Keisha hadn't just betrayed me. She'd committed fraud, forged medical documents, lied to her own mother's new husband's business partner, built an elaborate castle of lies that had fooled even an experienced notary. But castles built on lies, no matter how carefully constructed, all have one fatal weakness. They're built on nothing. And I was about to be the earthquake that brought it all crashing down. I arrived at Rosa's diner just as the sun was setting, painting the Atlanta sky in shades of orange and purple. Rosa was closing up, but she let me in when she saw my face. James, what happened? I couldn't speak. I just handed her the envelope. Rosa opened it and started reading. With each page, her expression shifted from shock to horror to pure rage. This is criminal, she finally whispered. James, with this evidence you can get everything back. You can send her to prison. I know. So what are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? Keisha was a criminal. She'd stolen from me, forged documents, and wished for my death. But she was also my daughter. The little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest while I read to her. The teenager who cried in my arms when her first boyfriend broke her heart. The young woman who told me on her college graduation day, "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Daddy." "I'm going to do what needs to be done," I finally said. "But first, I'm going to give her something she never gave me." "What's that?" "A chance. A chance to tell the truth. A chance to explain herself. A chance to make this right." Rosa looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "James, she doesn't deserve—" "Probably not," I interrupted. "But I'm not her. I'm not going to become the monster she turned into. I'm going to do this the right way. I'm going to give her one last opportunity to be the person I raised. And if she refuses—" I looked at the envelope sitting on the table, solid, undeniable evidence of my daughter's crimes. "Then God help her, because I won't." I called Keisha that same evening. She answered on the first ring, her voice cautious. "Daddy, I need you to come to Rose's diner tomorrow at 7 p.m. You and Patricia and Gerald. I don't know if that's—" "It's not a request, Keisha. It's a requirement. If you're not here tomorrow at 7, what I have to say, you'll be hearing from the district attorney instead." Silence. Then, in a frightened voice, "What are you talking about?" 7 p.m. tomorrow. Don't be late." I hung up before she could respond. That night, I didn't sleep. I spent the hours reviewing the documents, memorizing every detail, preparing for what was coming. Marcus Sterling, my attorney, had wanted to be present, but I asked him to wait outside in his car, ready to come in if needed. This was something I had to do alone. At exactly 7 p.m. the next evening, Keisha, Patricia, and Gerald walked into the diner. Rosa had closed early to give us privacy. It was just the four of us, and the truth waiting to be revealed. Keisha looked terrified. Patricia looked annoyed. Gerald looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "What's this about, James?" Patricia asked, using my first name like we were barely acquaintances. "Sit down," I said. My voice was calm in a way that clearly unsettled them. They sat across from me. I placed the envelope on the table between us, like a dealer revealing a winning hand. 3 days ago, I met with Diane Foster, the notary public. I believe you remember her, Keisha? The color drained from my daughter's face. "Daddy, I can explain." "No." My voice cut like a blade. "You've lied enough. Now you're going to sit there and listen." I opened the envelope and pulled out the first document. Forged medical certificates declaring me in a persistent vegetative state when I never was. The doctor's signatures were faked. Grady Memorial has no record of issuing these documents. That's forgery of official documents, Keisha. A felony that carries 5 to 10 years in prison. "I didn't know they were forged," Keisha started. But Gerald put his hand on her arm. "Don't say anything," he whispered to her. "Oh, no." "Gerald," I said, looking directly at him. "Let her talk. Let her explain how she didn't know she was using fake documents to rob her father." I pulled out another document. Power of attorney obtained through fraud. Property transfer from my house, $95,000, barely a quarter of its actual value, to your business partner, Richard Hutchins. But here's the interesting part. The money was never transferred. There was never a real sale. It was all a sham to give my property to Richard and Sharon without it looking like a gift. You know what that's called? Real estate fraud and tax evasion. Richard needed help, Gerald said, his voice defensive. His family was about to be evicted, and that justifies stealing from me? I stared at him. Your business partner needed help, so you decided to take from mine? You were in a coma. Patricia's voice rose. The doctors said you probably wouldn't wake up. The doctors never said that. They said my prognosis was uncertain. But uncertain wasn't convenient for you, was it? You needed me to be a lost cause to justify what you were planning. I pulled out more documents. $62,000 in my savings account gone. Keisha claims it went to medical expenses, but hospital records show only $11,800 in out-of-pocket costs. Where's the other $50,000, Keisha? My daughter's hands were shaking. She couldn't look me in the eye. And then there's the $4,000 the neighborhood raised for me. Money that never reached the hospital. Money that went toward. I paused, looking at each of them. Your new Mercedes, Keisha? The luxury vacation Patricia posted about on Facebook 4 months into my coma? Gerald's Rolex? Gerald instinctively covered his wrist. How did you? Patricia started. Because people talk, Patricia. Because the people in this neighborhood who actually care about me have been paying attention. They've been telling me things. Things about how you all celebrated when my prognosis looked bad. Things about how Keisha told her friends she'd finally have financial freedom. Things about how Gerald toasted the day the house papers were signed. That's not true. Keisha shouted, standing up. I never celebrated. I was devastated. Devastated? I laughed bitterly. So devastated that you waited only 3 months before erasing me from my life? So devastated that you forged medical documents? So devastated that you told me, right here in this diner, that things would have been simpler if I'd just died? Keisha collapsed back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. Daddy, things got out of control. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Then tell me the truth. All of it. Right now. She looked at Patricia, then at Gerald, then back at me. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Devin left me. 3 months into your coma, he filed for divorce. Sighed he couldn't handle the stress. Took half of everything we had. I was drowning in debt, his gambling debts that I didn't even know about. $70,000 owed to some very dangerous people who started showing up at my job, at my home. She wiped her eyes, her mascara running in dark streaks. Gerald said he could help. Said his business partner desperately needed a house and would pay cash quickly. Said we could use your power of attorney to make it happen. That you'd never know because you were never going to wake up. The doctors never said that. Gerald said they did? He said he talked to them, that they told him privately you had less than a 5% chance. I believed him because I needed to believe him. Because I was terrified and desperate and drowning. I looked at Gerald. Is that true? Did the doctors tell you that? Gerald shifted uncomfortably. The doctors said the prognosis was poor. I may have interpreted that more definitively than they intended. You lied to your stepdaughter so she'd commit fraud for you. I was trying to help my family. Gerald's voice rose. Richard was about to lose everything. Keisha needed money desperately. Patricia and I were struggling with my business debts. It seemed like a solution where everyone could benefit. Everyone except me. The silence that followed was absolute. I have 2 options, I said, looking at each of them. Option 1. I take these documents to the district attorney tomorrow morning. Keisha faces charges for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement, probably 7 to 15 years in prison. Gerald, you face charges as an accessory and conspiracy to commit fraud. Patricia, depending on how much you knew and when, you could be charged too. Richard and Sharon lose the house they thought they'd legally purchased. Everything gets destroyed. And option 2? Keisha asked, her voice breaking. Option 2. You have 72 hours to undo every single lie. You return the house to my name. You return every cent you can gather of my money. You confess everything to Richard and Sharon and help them find alternative housing. You make a public apology to the neighborhood for misusing their donated funds. And after that, I paused, the next words causing physical pain in my chest. After that, I never want to see any of you again. Daddy? Please, Keisha sobbed. I'm not your daddy anymore. The words felt like swallowing broken glass. A father is someone you honor and protect. You gave up that right when you signed those forged papers. When you wished I had died. We can't return everything in 72 hours, Gerald protested. Some of that money is already spent, gone, then get loans. Sell your possessions. Liquidate whatever you need to liquidate. Or don't and explain to a judge why you can't. I stood up, taking the envelope. You have until Saturday at 7 p.m. 1 minute later. And these documents go to the D, huh? I walked toward the door, then stopped without turning around. Keisha, when I built that house, every nail I hammered was thinking about you. Every weekend I sacrificed was for your future. I gave you everything, and you gave me betrayal. I'm sorry, she whispered. Daddy, I'm so sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back 6 months of my life. Sorry doesn't erase what you did. I opened the door. Don't call me Daddy again. You haven't earned that right. I walked out into the warm Georgia night, leaving behind my daughter's sobs, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. On Saturday at 6:45 p.m., Keisha came to the diner, alone. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She brought a briefcase and a bank envelope. It's all here, she said, her voice hollow. The deed transfer papers returning the house to your name signed and notarized by a different notary. The money. We could only gather $43,000. We sold both cars, my jewelry, furniture, Gerald's watch collection. Took out a personal loan for the rest. It's everything we could manage. It's enough, I said, taking the envelope. Richard and Sharon moved out yesterday. We found them a rental house in Marietta, 2 bedrooms, decent neighborhood. We're paying their first 6 months' rent. They're furious with us, but they're settled. I nodded. I posted an apology on the neighborhood Facebook page about the fundraiser money. Explained that it was mismanaged during a difficult time and that we're making financial restitution to anyone who contributed. She stood there like a child, waiting for punishment or absolution. But I was neither her parent nor her priest anymore. Is there anything else? I asked. Daddy, she caught herself. James, I need you to know. Gerald and I are done. Patricia left him yesterday, took her things, and moved in with her sister. And Devon's creditors are still coming after me. I'll probably have to declare bankruptcy. She laughed, a broken sound. I destroyed my marriage. My mother's marriage, my relationship with you, my financial future, all because I was weak and scared and let someone convince me that stealing from my own father was somehow acceptable. Will you ever forgive me? I looked at her, this woman who used to be my daughter, and searched for an honest answer. I don't know, I said truthfully. Maybe someday. Maybe years from now, when the wound isn't so fresh. But not today. Today, I can only tell you that I'm letting you go. I'm not prosecuting you. I'm not destroying what's left of your life. But I'm also not pretending we're family. So this is goodbye. This is what it has to be. Keisha nodded, tears falling silently. For what it's worth, I did love you. I still do. I just loved my own survival more. And that makes me a monster. It makes you human, I said, surprising myself. A human who made terrible choices. But human nonetheless. What you do with the rest of your life, whether you become someone better or let this define you forever, that's up to you now. She left without another word. I haven't seen her since. 3 weeks later, I moved back into my house. Richard and Sharon had made changes, yes, but nothing that couldn't be reversed. I hired a landscaper who helped me plant new azaleas where the old ones had been. They weren't the same. They'd never be the same. But they were beautiful in their own right. Rosa came over with her famous enchiladas and flan, helping me christen the kitchen properly. Marcus Sterling stopped by with his family, refusing any payment for his legal work. "This one was personal," he said. "You don't charge friends for doing what's right." Neighbors I'd known for decades came by with casseroles and welcome home signs. They'd known something wasn't right all along, but hadn't wanted to interfere in family business. I understood. Family is complicated. Love is complicated. And forgiveness is the most complicated thing of all. 8 months have passed now. My body has recovered better than the doctors predicted. Physical therapy, proper nutrition, and having a purpose again gave me back strength they thought I'd lost forever. Volunteer at the community center 3 days a week, helping other seniors navigate medical bureaucracy and legal issues. I've helped 2 families avoid situations similar to my adult children, trying to take advantage of elderly parents. Knowledge born from pain used to prevent someone else's suffering. Yesterday, I received a letter from Keisha. It's sitting on my kitchen table, unopened. Someday, I'll have the courage to read it. Someday, I'll be able to face her words without my heart breaking all over again. But not today, not today. I'm sitting on the porch I built with my own hands, watching the azaleas bloom in the evening light, and I'm grateful. Grateful to be alive. Grateful to have woken up. Grateful to have had the strength to fight for what was mine. And grateful to have learned that forgiveness isn't something you give because someone deserves it. It's something you give yourself so you can move forward. If you're listening to this and you've faced similar betrayals, I want you to know something. You're not alone. Family sometimes fails us in ways we never imagined. The people we love most can hurt us deepest. And that pain cuts in ways nothing else can. But you can survive this. You can recover. You can rebuild. I did it. I woke up after 6 months in a coma to find I'd lost everything that mattered. And yet here I am standing tall, living in my house, reclaiming my dignity, building a new life. Keisha took 6 months of my life, my house, and my savings. But she couldn't take the most important thing. She couldn't take who I am at my core. And in the end, that's what mattered most. I'm James Earl Robinson. I'm 58 years old. I'm a survivor. And I'm finally, truly free. Thank you for being here and letting me share my story. If it touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me what city and state you're watching from. I love knowing where you all are. If you want to support me even more, there's a donation link in the description. I share real-life stories like this every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular videos will appear on your screen. Choose whichever one calls to you. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over just because someone tried to write the ending without you.